Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as the show stretches admirably against its newly imposed restrictions. When the show rooted itself in 20th century Earth, it fairly obviously limited itself in scope. Beforehand, it had all of time and space to play with and bubble wrap with which to achieve it. And so it sort of like had a fairly limitless sense of enthusiasm and experimentation. Let's try a planet of giant insects. Let's take the crew out of reality altogether. What if they land in their own future? And while the earthbound unit format did make the bubble wrap go a longer way, it did also have to shackle a lot of that imagination. Or did it? After all, good imagination cannot be beaten by limitations. It works around them, uses them even. And I think it was Malcolm Hulke that said, these new limitations meant you could only do really one of two stories, either Mad Scientist or Alien Invasion. To hit upon a notion for a third type, that the aliens aren't in fact aliens and are the indigenous species of Earth who were hibernating while we evolved, is an absolute masterstroke and quite typical of the verve and creativity that Doctor Who can show when it's backed into a corner. And to do this third type of story second is insanity, and again, typical of the verve and creativity that Doctor Who can show. Doing it this early on instead of saving it for shaking up the format later on is to be lauded. And its originality does carry it pretty far. It's the first 7-part story since The Evil of the Daleks, and as with most stories over 6 episodes in length, it doesn't need that many episodes. But its central premise is such an intriguing one that it's no surprise that it becomes its defining identifier, above and beyond the Silurians themselves. There is such an out-of-the-box thinking in terms of its starting point that I could easily forgive it some of its perceived flaws later on. Put simply, I love Doctor Who and the Silurians. For a start, it contains perhaps my single most favourite moment of the entire show so far. At the end of episode 3, we get our first look at the titular Silurians as it appears to be menacing the Doctor. Cue cliffhanger. Obviously, the Doctor is in danger at the hands of a big green monster. Of course, cue cliffhanger. But that he then begins episode 4 by just spectacularly undercutting that cliffhanger by holding out a hand of friendship to the Silurian is the single most Doctor-y moment yet.
Hello. Are you a Silurian?
It's brilliant. It feels like it's been a long old while since we've seen this side to the Doctor. When he did something similar in the Faceless ones, I applauded that then as well, and then became increasingly more and more disappointed as he seemed to sort of like forget that mindset in favour of like throwing Ice Warriors into suns, etc. To have him back to this kind of Doctor is really welcome. This carries on throughout the rest of the story as well, and he tries to get both sides to see sense. And it's such a good basis for a Doctor Who story that they will tell it again 3 more times. And how wonderful to see the Doctor battling not a singularly monstrous and evil alien race, but to see him fighting against an unwinnable situation where there could be said to be villains on both sides. And because of this plot thread, it definitely feels more intelligent and mature than a lot of Doctor Who I have recently covered on this marathon. Not that they're subtle about this, by the way, and again, maybe this is just me, but I've always been able to detect in some of the Silurian voices a kind of like Russian twang. Now if that's the case, then maybe that is pretty heavy-handed, but the fact that both sides are depicted with shades of grey, there's good and bad on either side, then maybe it could be seen to be quite progressive for the time that it was made. And look, making them sound a bit Soviet could just be me projecting. Maybe that was never the intention, and maybe that's not even how they sound, and it's just something I'm picking up on, and that I may be pouring a lot more meaning into because of Malcolm Hulke's associations with the Communist Party. I don't know, but regardless of the intention and regardless of the sort of outcome on that regard, because maybe they don't sound a bit Soviet and it is just me. The fact that both sides are depicted with heroes and villains, with good and bad, and like I say, it's sketched in shades of grey rather than just being black and white. It makes for a far more interesting and intelligent experience than just your average run around with lizard monsters. The Silurians' predicament is pretty original too. Not waking up because the disaster they were anticipating never happened and the planet on the expected collision course became the moon. That's a great way of explaining their decision to hibernate and why they never came out of said hibernation in one single line. That's really good stuff, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. It is another great idea in a story which is itself a great idea. But while we do have a spellbinding idea that has some such strong tools in its toolbox, one slight problem is the length of the damn thing. Now, despite that, it does a fantastic job of maintaining its pace and keeping up its story. And like I said earlier, I end up being able to look past these sort of minor quibbles because the whole package is so damn good. I can overlook the fact that episodes 6 and 4 have pretty much the same cliffhanger, which is the Doctor going cross-eyed while a Silurian whistles its headlamp at him. Speaking of which, they're evolved lizard people, right? I'll buy that, despite the, scientific and historical inaccuracies of the time period they're meant to be from. I'll buy all of that because I've bought into the premise already, but that light of theirs? Did the lizard people evolve that light in their head, or did they just install it there surgically? I mean, I'm inclined to go with the latter, and I can see that maybe they'd install it surgically so it's better to sort of communicate with all of their wireless technology, like being able to unlock their doors and so on. But if that's the case, why not invent clothes? The Silurians are nude, fine. A lot of Doctor Who monsters are, but their Sea Devil relatives sort of wear string vests, and the Homo Reptilia of the Revive series, they've all got clobber on as well. So do they all sort of point and laugh behind the Silurians' back at the fact that they're nude, or is this entire civilization kind of evolved past that and to become I guess sort of quite accepting of certain races practicing nudism? Now, I know full well that that's me going down a rabbit hole, and none of that is vital to enjoying this story or any of the subsequent Homo Reptilia stories. It's just that I wouldn't mind an exploration of it at some point. I mean about the head lights, the light in the head. I don't need sort of I don't need a 3-novel series about reptilian naturism. I don't need that. But if I am missing out on an explanation of the 4 headlight in some expanded media, please do let me know in the comments below, because I will automatically go and check that out. Anyway, regardless of Silurian sartorial proclivities, it's around episode 6 that this story could be said to start running out of steam. And I've seen that criticism levelled several times, and on some viewings I found myself agreeing with it. But you see, on this one, I don't think I can, actually. The addition of the contagion in itself is properly frightening. Where people start collapsing in the station, it's gruesome, more gruesome than the show has been for a good long while. And its late addition to the plot and the impact it has does stop things from stagnating at the 6 episode mark. And when it's first introduced, it really is a left turn for the story into something altogether darker and more terrifying. Now, with my critical hat on in terms of this piece as a whole, all it really serves to do is stall the Silurian activities and force the Doctor to sit down and find an antidote for an episode. He does, obviously, but I have to concede it's probably not woven as elegantly as it could be into the script. He sits down, tests things with Liz, says Eureka with no irony, and bam, the plague is cured. So yeah, I can understand some of the criticisms, because this whole thread kind of looks just like filler, which hasn't put any effort in to disguise itself as anything but. It's just that there's so much good stuff elsewhere in this story, and even the stark depiction of the plague unleashed is so bleak and arresting that I just have to sort of throw my critical hat back on the hat stand for the time being and just enjoy this, because it is so well done. And in addition to the genius premise, there's the cast. Peter Miles as Lawrence is great value, and when he goes proper berserk before expiring, it's charged with unpredictability. Fulton Mackay as Quinn also brings some class to proceedings, and his evident being up to no good makes for some excellent rapport with the Doctor. The Doctor's onto him almost immediately, and Pertwee plays it brilliantly, applying pressure to Quinn each time he sees him. And Jeffrey Palmer as Masters is fun to watch as he unravels from stuffy and pompous besuited high-powered bureaucrat to disease-riddled inelegant and dignified corpse. It's a fun journey to take with him, if rather morbid. I'm still really liking Liz too. She is in danger of being a little bit sidelined here and treated as the little woman, you know. Told to stay behind, protests, but then stays behind anyway because... But she still has enough attitude to be a strong presence when she is needed. And, you know, there's one time where she doesn't stay behind and does go down into the caves with the Doctor. Still, this is only her second story, and I am getting a little bit tired already of her being told to stay behind and then not even being allowed to argue the toss by the Doctor cutting in and telling her that maybe she should stay behind where it's safe. Like, that's not a good sign that I'm tiring of that already at this early stage. And it's almost as if the writers are sort of like wanting to address sexism but are only paying lip service to it rather than actually exploring this as something worth exploring. It's like they want to address it but not actually do anything meaningful to combat it. See, I've always been really fond of Liz. I'm more than a little bit gutted at the short straw that she got during her time on the show. So at this point on marathons, I always just tend to enjoy what brief time I have with her, and the same is true here. On to the Doctor. Pertwee waltzed into the part in the previous story, made it his own, and became very comfortable with it within the space of 4 episodes. As far as I'm concerned, he's already settled, and there's absolutely no need for him to get any more comfortable. He starts Doctor Who and the Silurians firmly the leading man, and most definitely the Doctor. Just getting on with things, like he's no less impressive here than he was in Spearhead from Space, and it's mainly through his performance that I am so excited by this new era. Out of the new format, the new companion and the new Doctor, while I have time for them all, it is the new Doctor which wins out for me. He's easily the most impressive thing about this whole restructuring, and he has some fantastic things to do in this story.
Well, I've got no time to chat to undersecretaries, permanent or otherwise. I must find the Brigadier.
May I ask who you are?
You may ask.
It may make a couple of tiny mistakes, but I still consider this one of Doctor Who's out-and-out classics. The third Doctor's induction into the show is continuing apace, and I have to say, like, still continuing to impress. And after 264 episodes, I am delighted at how the show is still finding new stories to tell, and I'm really enjoying how much I'm enjoying the third Doctor. Onwards.
Hello. Are you a Silurian?
Doris, get on to the police. Tell them there's something in my barn.
Get on to the police. Tell them there's something in my barn.
Worst performance in the show yet, including the Clantons. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this simping over a Silurian skirmish, then you know how YouTube works. Please do hit the up thumb and share it around. And what do you think of this story? Is it the gold standard of this period of Doctor Who? Indeed, Doctor Who as a whole? Or is it an overstuffed, overlong fossil? Is Jon Pertwee firing on all cylinders, or is he leaving you a little bit cold? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a breaking news story about the missing Mars Probe 7. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I will see you at Space Control.